Welcome to Smiley's. I'm Mora, and today we are going to talk about House of Chains.
I'm Lee, and today, specifically, I'm tackling the entire book, because that book is huge, and we're going to tackle the character within the book. We're going to be tackling the themes of the book, chiefly, primarily.
Briefly.
Mostly? Mora?
Vaguely. Okay.
We hope you enjoy.
So this episode is going to cover spoilers from Book 1 to Book 4 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Hi Lee.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing well.
So we recently finished House of Chains because we read it for the read along on the subreddit. So this was our second read for both of us. How did you feel it this time?
The very obvious thing you notice is that it flows a lot better. I read it very quickly, relatively speaking. And along with Memories of Ice, it does a lot of preparatory work. Because, you have Gone to the Moon, which is just set up. Then House Gate, which is its own complete story and set up for the future. But Memories of Ice and House of Chains both do a lot of world building and heavy lifting for the future, while also telling their own concise stories, which is very nice. And it's a lot better an experience this time around, because the first time around, first of all, there's a new character, which you follow for the entire first quarter of the book. And it's a lot of new settings and a lot of nonsense, like robotic storyline, which just most of it you don't understand. There's a lot of sitting around and talking and not very much action, like in other books. Like the past 3 books, there was a lot of action. In this book, not so much. And it can feel either boring or just, more difficult, let's say, for a first-time reader. But on the second read, it flows a lot better. It's structured very well. And you tend to notice a lot more things that you missed the first time around. So, I don't know where I would rank it on my list now, but it's pretty good. It's a good read.
Okay. No, I don't rank the books, so...
I don't either. I just tend to have a mental image of where each book slots in. But after reading them again, it's just a bit of a mess, so...
Okay. So there are only a few later books which I didn't really enjoy reading them. But all these early books, I don't know. I didn't have a problem the first time. And I think this time it just went much more smoothly. Because, you have much better idea of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of things I missed out on my first read, I'm pretty sure that when I was reading House of Chains the first time, I literally did not know that a goddess had possessed Felicin for, quite a while. I'm pretty sure it was towards the end, towards the climax. And that's when I realized that, there's an actual goddess and, Felicin is able to talk to her. I just assumed that, it was some unnamed, unknown, some entity which has taken over and she's not able to communicate and all that. But that's what I thought during my first read. Mm-hmm. Did you miss anything in your first time? Was anything new to you this time? No, you just got everything. Yeah.
Of course. I knew everything when I first read it. I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. Obviously, I missed a lot of things.
Anything about Lorik, Osric, anything with the, what do you call it? The Onrak and his storyline?
I didn't actually know that the Unbound, the 7 Faces in the Rock, served the Crippled God for the entire book. I had no idea.
Okay.
Even after finishing the book, they're these guys exist and they do their own thing. I completely missed it. It's explicitly stated in the first chapter of the book and I missed it completely.
Yeah. No, actually the whole influence of Crippled God, right? It's pretty easy to miss, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's obvious, every page tells you that the Crippled God is behind all these things happening here. But at least when I read it for the first time, I just thought, it's just some Crippled God is there somewhere. They've given him a House of Chains and, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Only here I'm noticing, how much his influence has spread everywhere, right?
Yeah. This ties in, of course, into the name of the book, which should be a dead giveaway that someone's behind this, House of Chains. Where have I seen the House of Chains before? But I'm a bit tone deaf and a bit blind. So not only did I miss completely that Drishna is aligned with the Crippled God, I also missed that the Unbound were aligned with the Crippled God. And I was like, yeah, you know what? They're doing their thing. They're mad. They have complex anger issues, or in the case of Drishna, or god complexes in the Unbound. Had no idea they served another master, like they said all the time. No clue.
Now when you look at it, it's so obvious, right?
Of course it's obvious, yes.
You can't miss it if you want to.
But that's just hindsight, right? Things we know now, we didn't at the time.
No, I'm pretty sure there are many people who would have got it, in the first read.
Of course. We shouldn't be too harsh on ourselves. But we can be harsh now, because,
Yeah, what were you thinking?
Well, there's that. And there's the ever-permeating theme of chains throughout the book, right?
Yeah.
To segue to the main part of the episode.
Sure.
They're everywhere. If you look, basically, every single character that appears in the book, to some degree or another, has some form of change. We've already talked about Karsa and his arc and how that relates. First of all, he gets chained a lot by the Malazans, by Silga, by slaves. And there's metaphorical change, which are from Urigal and the Crippled God, which we should have noticed from the start, but we didn't. And he carries them around, and it takes him virtually the entire book to break them and integrate them into his character. Because, yes, he breaks the chains of the Sunid or his own, but he then integrates the spirits of his friends, which follow him around, into his soul and uses them to temper his personality, to provide him wisdom, to help him, to provide company. In a very real way, he breaks his chains, if you will. All the characters don't do this.
Yeah.
There are a couple examples I have in mind, but I would hear your examples first, so we don't speak about the same thing.
Yeah, that's okay. It's going to overlap because,
Of course it is, but
themes are themes. So, the obvious other character who chains herself to her destiny is probably Felicin.
Mm-hmm.
See, there are a few things she gets chained herself to, right? Just like Karsa, she is chosen by a powerful being, Drijna, who tries to chain her to her destiny. Drijna is a raging goddess. She just wants revenge. And she finds a suitable vessel in Felicin once the Elder Shaikh dies. So she just grabs her. And, Felicin is looking to have her sort of revenge on her sister. And she chains herself to this goddess. So it's a sort of mutual... Would you call it mutual? Because there is a lot of power difference there. So that's why I would like to say that Felicin has surrendered herself to this goddess. She has willingly taken upon the chains to be manipulated by this goddess because Felicin thinks that she can achieve what she wants. Like her most important priority right now is revenge on Tavor, who she believes has betrayed her. So that is one type of chains, and the chains are broken by other external forces, and it basically leaves her bereft. Felicin doesn't have the agency to break the chains herself, and she dies due to that basically.
Mm-hmm.
Did you had some objection to me saying that she has surrendered herself willingly? Yeah, go on.
So I think Felicin Paran in the House Gates is willing to surrender herself to Drijna. She is willing to give herself because all she thinks of, all she wants at the time is revenge, because she just came back from hell, was dropped into another hell, then a different one, and now she's in Raragu. Okay, she went from Judgment's Round, where she was chained physically, to the slave ships, where she was chained, to the Tatar mines, where she was chained, to a desert of both the Tatar Island and then Seven Cities mainland, and then she eventually happens upon Leoman and Toblakai and becomes Shaik reborn. That Felicin would accept chains, would willingly chain herself to the goddess, because all she can think of at the time is vengeance. Vengeance because she hurts. Vengeance because her sister has physically and mentally abused her in her mind, and thus must pay for her crimes. And what's the first thing she does when she enters Raraku?
What does she do? She adopts Felicin younger.
She adopts Felicin.
Yeah.
And then she adopts every child in Raraku, which pisses off Pidithal. And then she takes up poetry. And then she talks to Karsa. She talks to a whole host of she talks to her Boric.
Yeah.
She has, in House of Chains, a host of expanded responsibilities that a mad, vengeance-driven goddess and her vessel just cannot do. Which is why Drijna essentially subverts Felicin to achieve her goals. Shaik is not Felicin.
Yeah.
Shaik is a vessel of Drijna, through which Drijna essentially gets to destroy the world because she's mad at everything.
Yeah.
And at no point do we see this better exemplified than when Heboric becomes the center of reach, and he ushers Felicin into his tent, and suddenly everything just wipes clean. Yes. And while for like 3 chapters we see Shaik not care all about the whereabouts and the fate of Felicin Younger, the first thing she asks when she is come to her senses is, where is Felicin? And B, Benneth is an asshole, and he abused me, and he raped me, and he used me, and he deserves everything he got. Because Felicin Paran does not think the same way now as she did in Death House Gates. And she does not want these chains. She does not want them anymore. She does not want to willingly surrender herself. And then she gets ushered out of the tent by Heboric, pushes those chains back on her, and then immediately she goes back, yes, I was headed to Lorik or something. I don't remember where she's going. And that is poignant, because those chains were not willingly taken on by her. And later, in the climax of the story, when Felicin dies, she relates her relationship with Tavo, being siblings, as chains. They are chained by blood. And how does one break an unbreakable chain? Like, blood dies? And she answers her own question by dying.
Right.
Which brings us to the next point, a segue into Tavo, her chains.
Can I?
Did you want to talk about that, or should I?
No. I want to still continue the Felicin talk.
Oh, sure.
If you don't mind, because
Yeah.
I don't agree that she's trying to refuse the chains even in this book, right? She might have accepted the chains in Deadhouse Gates willingly because she literally had no other choice, right? She would have just gone on suffering in Raraku, and who knows what would have happened. So there, she thought it was a mutually beneficial alliance with the goddess. And at least here, what I see, the way I read it is, Drishna has taken over completely. Mm-hmm. She has given no place for Felicin or her thinking or her emotions to have any sort of role. She has basically... do you see that the whole book has a lot of addiction themes? Everyone is addicted to so many things and everyone is kept under some kind of fog. Mm-hmm. I believe that's what Drishna does the same with Felicin. She keeps her under a fog, makes sure that she doesn't think critically, makes sure she doesn't question anything that is happening around her. And that scene you mentioned, where Heboric's power basically kicks out Drishna. And that's when she's able to sit and think about it, right? So that's when her innermost emotions come out. And even then, she doesn't really bridle against the chains. She doesn't really go further enough to think that why have I neglected her for so many days? And, she's completely under the fog. I wouldn't blame her for that, because she did not know how pervasive those chains would be when she accepted them from the goddess. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's not a question of whether she is willingly surrendered or not, but she's not trying to break away from it. She still wants to have her revenge. She still wants to continue the battle. And I don't think that she would... she did have a choice, right? At the very end, she could have still walked away. She could have still lifted her helmet and met her sister, and who knows what Tavo would have done. But she didn't. She continued on even without the goddess. So I don't think you can say that the chains were forced on her.
I have a couple of objections to this. So, first of all, Drishna died when Tavo was like 10 paces away from Felicin.
Yeah.
I really don't think that Felicin had enough time to put away her sword, raise her helmet, and then see Tavo for herself. Because, first of all, there's the shock of suddenly having your own mind returned back to you.
Right.
Second of all, she's in armor that she has never worn in her life. Anyway, I'm not going to discuss here if Felicin if she could have, or if she would have actually revealed... I think that was part of her plan. Like, part of the plan was to eventually reveal to Tavo that, hi, I'm your sister, I know everything about you.
Yeah, I think she planned it that, when Tavo is lying on the dust and dying, that's when she would reveal it, yeah.
I don't think she had the chance to do it regardless.
True.
The other thing is, there is a constant battle between the two, between Felicin Paran and Drishna in Shaik throughout the book. First of all, you have Shaik's obsession with poetry. She writes poetry, right? And that habit of hers has transferred down to Felicin Younger.
Yeah.
Drishna has absolutely no use for poetry. I think Karsa, maybe, puts it very well, very succinctly, somewhere in the early book. Within Shaik, there are two minds warring. One wishes only destruction, which is Drishna, and the other wishes to create. Eventually, we know, of course, destruction wins over. But to say that Felicin willingly gave herself up and then continues to willingly give herself up is not entirely correct, in my view.
Okay.
Now, does this mean that had Felicin entire free will of her own, she would have sought to make amends with Tavo? I don't think so. I think she's far too scarred for that and far too committed, and just, I have everything I need by now, right? I have an army. You're in my area. I have high mages. I have all that stuff. I can kill her. I can take vengeance. I think Felicin wants that. I just think Drishna wants so much more, and it overpowers Felicin, and that is something Felicin would never accept. Mm-hmm. So, to continue a bit on this, there was something I wanted to say, and I forgot what it was.
About Tavo?
Yeah. So, what I remembered is Lorik eventually, in I think chapter 8 or something, gathers everyone around and tells them the disposition of the Malazan army. Right? That there was a great battle in Shonabakis, and the Whiskey Jack is dead, and the Brisbanes are destroyed. And among the survivors rank like Picker, Bluebell, which he mentioned Toes is dead, Bluebell is alive, Ansi, Blend, and Captain Barron.
Yeah.
And when that name is dropped, Felicin orders everyone out
Except Heboric. Yeah.
and then weeps in his shoulders.
Yeah.
Are you done talking about Felicin? Because there's a brilliant segue I have here.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah, please.
So, Felicin later dies.
Yeah.
And the blood ties between Tavor and Felicin are broken. The chain whose length is ever prescribed, but its weight ever varies. But Felicin dies, and her only regret in life, the only thing she wants to know, the only thing she talks about in her monologue as she dies, is why didn't you love me back? That's what I wanted to know. But she knows that everything Tavor did, she did in vain. Because her brother's alive, she could find another way that did not involve sacrificing her sister and becoming adjunct. Tavor still carries those chains well into House of Chains, and after it ends. Because after she kills Felicin, Pearl comes up and tells her, oh, your sister's dead. So now she thinks she's alone. Her parents are both dead. Both her dad and her mother are dead. Ganos is dead. And Felicin, she just learns, is dead. Little does she know, she actually just killed her.
Yeah.
So, on top of all the other chains, which we'll get to in a moment, that Tavor carries with her, the most heavy ones, in my view, are her families. That she must keep up the family legacy. She must keep the household from collapsing, because both her parents are dead, and she's been working on this non-stop since Guns of the Moon, because her father is sick and he can't keep up the chores and the everyday life of the Baron house. She has taken that role. In 1161, when Gano's 19, 20, and Tavor's a year younger than him.
Yeah.
And then both her parents die, and then her brother dies, and her sister dies, and suddenly, on top of everything she had to do, sacrificing her sister, becoming adjunct, doing whatever she needed to do to save the house. It even led to Gamut dying, which was her house guard, and it was all for naught, because everyone is dead and I'm alone. And those are some heavy goddamn chains that weigh down on her. So, the other chains that she carries is, of course, you may remember...
the Empress's one?
Beyond the Empress, there's also Coltane's. Coltane's legacy is omnipresent. It oozes out of every pore in Seven Cities. There's a very obvious one, which is the remaining Wiccans, Temul, the Wiccan youths, and the 3 elder Wiccans that don't obey Temul and piss him off.
Yeah.
There's the Seti, which try to emulate the Wiccans. There's the Kundril, much later meets, who avow service to Tavor because they fail at protecting Coltane. And she doesn't bring this up again, but in chapter 5, she says something to Temul about the cavalry detachment. And Temul counters by replying that Coltane would have done this in a different way. And then Tavor snaps back at him, this is not Coltane's war.
Yeah.
And then as she moves on, as she goes through Iron Way, as she goes through the Kundra Lowdown, as she gets to all the Vathar Crossing, for hood's sake, everywhere, throughout Seven Cities, Coltane's legacy is ever present. Everyone, and she also carries the survivors of the Chain of Dogs with her. The Iron Garrison that watched, the army that watched, the city that watched.
Yeah.
Scarred veterans, broken veterans, under an army of new recruits, commanded by an adjunct that is completely untested, thinking that most of her family, if not all of it, is dead. I have no more to say for the moment. Please go on, because I am tired of monologuing. There is more to say on this, if you would.
About Tavor.
Of course. There's more change that she carries, I think. Wouldn't you say? You said the Empress. You mentioned the Empress earlier.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, because that's the biggest chain, right? She ends up on 7 cities, primarily because of that obligation to the Empire. She comes here to put down the actual rebellion, which was only partially broken by Coltane. So she has to take it up. I don't know. Would you call that chain? It's an obligation, but maybe thematically you can call it a chain.
I mean, lest we forget that she is in the service of the woman that killed her family, right?
Did she now?
For one, the call is definitely because of what Lacine did, right? So Felicin's fate is tied to Lacine. Ganos' fate is tied to Lacine, because she was the one that sent him over to Xenobagis to die, and then she outlawed his army, and then she being Tavor in this case, had to do what she did to avoid the shame that was brought on by the Brisbane being outlawed. That's 2 of them. Her father apparently was stressed because of issues that Lacine had with nobles, so that's 2.5. So basically all of Tavor's family and their misfortunes can be laid at Lacine's feet. and she had to serve this woman. And she does. That's the most strange part. Like, she does. And she seems genuinely interested in understanding what this woman, how she thinks. She asks Nock about it.
No, at least about in House of Chains. What I see is her loyalty to the Empire. It's not something to do with Lasine.
Of course not, yeah, but...
Because we don't really get any inner thoughts, obviously. We don't get any interactions or anything. All we see is an adjunct going about doing her job, so...
I think she's especially interested in Lasine because, for one, when she meets Pearl and Ostara to send them over to find Felicin, she specifically says to Gamut that in this room, the Empress is not present. Not the Empire, the Empress, specifically. And then she later goes on to ask Nock about why they, being the old guard and the Nappans, abandoned the Empress. She wants to know more about the Empress herself. She knows about the Empire. Who knows? She studied for years. She knows about battles from between the Devore household and the Undan hegemony. She knows about some tactic that Dasim used 10-15 years ago.
Yeah.
She has studied Imperial history extensively. She knows how the Empire works, but she does not understand Lasine, and she wants to understand her, so she knows what kind of woman she's serving. Because precisely she is chained to her because of her allegiance to the Empire.
Yeah.
Go on, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just... It's still, that scene, you couldn't read it as her being loyal to Lasine when she's cautioning Pearl that this particular task is not against the interests of the Empire, because, she's just being careful. Who knows what Pearl's next step would be, And Lostara is obviously extremely hesitant to do anything against Lasine.
Mm-hmm.
So I just read that scene as her being very careful, not really, making sure that they don't question her loyalty.
Right.
That's all.
Because she has every reason to not be loyal. What more reason does Devore need to not be loyal to Lasine beyond her killing her and her family and disgracing it?
Yeah.
So, because she is chained to the Empire and to Lasine, she needs to ensure that everyone knows that she's loyal to her. I think you may agree with us.
Yeah. Finally, yeah.
So we talked about the chains and burdens of loyalty. Despite a personal dislike of the person you're serving, who else does this remind you of that we talked about recently?
In this book?
Yes, it's Cutter. It's Cutter.
Cutter. Oh yeah. We finally got to Cutter. Yeah.
Cutter, Absalar, and Cotillion have a very interesting dynamic between the three of them. It depends on your interpretation, but to wax a bit poetic here, Amanas in Chapter 1 of Guardians of the Moon said, "Beware of shadows bearing gift," and then goes on to possess story. In Chapter 23 of Dead House Gates, Amanas swears to Absalar that he will send them to their village and he will not bother them again. They will be completely... how does he put it? Hang on.
Is this Amanas or Cotillion?
Amanas says this, but he says this on behalf of Cotillion as well. He says to both of them, we want neither... Absalar tells him that she wants neither of them to be associated with Absalar, Relok, or Crocus.
Okay.
And she asks him specifically to send them to their facing village. First question, Where does Amanas send them?
Doesn't he send them back into Khan?
He sends them to an alley in Khan rather than the fishing village. And how do they get back? They have to do a job for a local bookmaker, which leads to Cutter killing 2 people.
Yes.
Second question, who appears right after Relok dies? Hood does. After that.
After Hood, Cotillion appears.
After Hood, Cotillion appears. So, that's 2 strikes. Because we already said, we established that you would send us to our fishing village in Kokan, and you would not bother us again. And they do neither of those things. Now, Cotillion is not Amanas. I think we can agree with that. He, as far as we can tell, has much more of a conscience, despite being the patron god of assassins. He seems to be more compassionate, less of an asshole. I'm just going to put it that way. I don't much like Amanas.
More of a human.
But what is the first thing he does when he comes to them? He talks about Relok being dead, and then he inquires of Crocus, who is now named Cutter, about Absalar's whereabouts. And Cutter sees him and is like, why the fuck are you here? But he's Cutter now, and he's an assassin, and that is his patron god. So, Cutter must show some respect to Cotillion. And it's evident that Crocus does not understand how this goes, because he offers his service to him. He says, isn't this expected? And Cotillion responds that, no, it's not expected. I'm asking.
No, actually, Cotillion, I think, has a moment when he says that I could have taken advantage of this, but
Yeah, he even tells him,
the lad is innocent.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then when he asks Carter if he would like the best of blades, and Carter says no, he says, okay, I have no idea what to give you. Usually I'm supposed to give you something in return for service. And what does Carter ask him?
Some questions, right? He wants to know about something.
And he's very blunt in the way he asks questions.
Oh, he just asks, why did you do this? Yeah.
Yes, he straight up asks him, why? Why? Why did you possess Absalom? Why did you do this to her? Why didn't you give her a choice?
Yeah.
What do you have against Lacine that's so important to possess her? What's the problem? Why are you doing this? Do you regret it? And that's what hits him. That's what hits Cotillion. His bluntness, his honesty, and the way he phrases things. So, Absalom, of course, and Kata are both chained, in some sense, to service and shadow because of Absalom's position. But in a similar sense, because of the conscience that Cotillion developed, he's similarly chained to the two of them because he cannot just ask them to do something, expect service, and then leave.
Yeah.
He mentions this notion of reciprocity. He says, I will do something for you in return for service.
Yeah.
It is also interesting to notice, this does not tie in so much into chains, but another theme of, you mentioned unrequited love, Felison also ties into, that Absalom and Carter both love each other. Cotillion even says this to Absalom later, that it's not just two. It's not just you and the assassin. There are multitudes of you, and Carter loves them all.
Yeah.
They love each other dearly, honestly, but they hate what they have become.
Yeah.
And Cotillion is to blame for what they have become, let's make no mistake. Neither of them would have ended up this way, if not for Cotillion. And Cotillion feels for that. He understands that, he knows that, and he seeks to make amends. I would have your thoughts on this before I could continue going on, because I feel like I'm monologuing too much.
Yeah, I think you said it all. You know how this theme keeps coming up, right? When people start worshipping ascendants and they become gods. I think by House of Chains, we are aware of this concept, no?
I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm just saying that each time a mortal worships a god, the god is bound to that worshipper, right? So it's always a two-way street.
I don't think bound is the right word. I think he is changed, morphed somehow. This is explored later, a lot more. But yes, he is in some way changed by the worshipper.
Yeah. So isn't that why some of the ascendants actually reject godhood? Because they don't want to be chained to their followers. So that's pretty much what we see with Cotillion. The more he asks them to do things for him, the more he starts influencing his followers, the more he's getting changed, either because he's susceptible to such things or what. But of all the gods we see in this book, he's the only one who grows the other way. We just see all these mindless, hurtful gods, from Cripple God to Drijna.
To the seven faces in the rock, the Unbound.
Yeah, but they're all, different faces of the Cripple God, basically. And even Loric's father.
Yeah, Osirk.
The one the Leosan worship.
Osirk.
So all these gods are, they're indifferent at best. Or at worst, they're cruel. They expect inhuman things from their worshippers. And Cotillion is the only exception to this, because he is becoming less of a god and more of a human, more of a patron. He calls himself that I'm not your typical god, I'm a patron. And so I have responsibilities. And obviously Cutter and Apsala are new to all this, but at least Lostara is a little taken aback by his
humanity.
His humanity, yeah. She's the one, I think, who asks him, right? That he seems less of a god.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the one contrast we have to all the other gods we see here, Cotillion.
I think the only thing I have to add on Cotillion before we go on is his distinct, unique relationship with Kalam, in which they banter together. They speak about like, oh, your wife sent you away and I came here to find you because you seemed like you needed a friend. And he's like, I have marital problems. I do not mediate marital disputes. Depends on how heated they get and whatnot. And Cotillion comes to Kalam because Kalam chafes, because Kalam's bored. He doesn't come to him because Kalam is a very good assassin, lest we forget.
No, Cotillion comes to him because Cotillion needs him.
Of course, but, he doesn't come to him because... See,
would you put it past Amanas and Cotillion to cause a rift between these two? Between Kalam and Minala?
Oh, come on. No, come on.
They don't need much. You just instigate a fight between these, 1,500 children. And Kalam is going to find his way, roaming around the shadow realm aimlessly. So obviously you dangle a new assignment for him and he's going to grab it.
More chains, because he felt as if he was chained to Manala and children, and then these two gods, apparently, maybe, broke these chains for him, and now he's free to wander and do whatever Cotillion wants him to. I don't think I have anything more to add on Cotillion. Frankly, that he's much too complex to tackle on a single episode about themes in a separate book.
Yeah.
So there are a lot more. We already talked about Karsa in a separate episode about his chain. We talked about Tavor, not about Felicin. We talked about Cotillion, Absalom, and Kata. We did not talk about probably my favorite bromance in the books, Thrall and Onrak. So, first of all, we see Thrall literally get chained in the start of the book. He gets chained to the Nascent Realm and left to drown. Because, yeah. Now, why that happens is because he apparently betrayed his brothers and something. And his brothers started talking shit about him and something like that. It doesn't matter. The reason doesn't matter. And then he remarked, well, like, his brother had... How does he put it? Something about nature, like broke the balance in nature, and nature doesn't stand for that.
Nature ever strives for balance, something like that.
Something like that. So, point is, Thrall starts off being chained. And then Onrak, who is clanless, that's important. He is still bound by the ritual of Tellan, like most of them must. But he isn't bound to a clan or a bonecaster or some of the sort. And he happens upon this chained man, this Eater, this guy. Probably, I don't even know if he has seen an Eater before. And Thrall beseeches him to free him. And Onrak belittles him as a traitor. He says, I do not, talk with traitors. And Thrall replies, among my kind, I am the only one that's not a traitor. He also later says that he is plagued by his need to be truthful, which is what inevitably led to him being chained. But to not get into too many more details, because, surprise, surprise, Thrall's story continues.
Yeah.
Thrall is the only Eater that we know of so far that is not chained to the service of the chained one, of the crippled god.
Is that, can you assert it so positively in House of Chains?
Thrall says so. He says so himself, that I am the only one that is not in the service of the chained one. And that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Can we believe him? But the point is, he believes it. He thinks so. And when Onrak breaks his chains, that's the theme again, and then carries him away, Onrak later gets broken, physically, and in a more magic sense, I guess, because his soul gets released from the ritual of Tellan, in a way.
Yeah.
That's another chain broken, because he is no longer bound to the ritual. So we have two unchained gentlemen. Thrall Senga, no longer chained to the Nascent, literally, and he's not bound to the service of the crippled god, figuratively. And then you also have Onrak, who is not chained, right? And also no longer bound to the ritual of Tellan. And then the two of them link to one another with chains, because Onrak swears a vow to protect Thrall, and he even says himself that these chains cannot be broken.
Yeah.
So there's there's multiple facets to this. It's not just, being chained is bad because Karsa suffers. He doesn't. Pyroth and Delum later help him, because Felicin suffers, because, Trishna wants to destroy the world or something. That is true. Tavor suffers. That is also true. But here, we have a case of that theme being positive, of Thrall and Onrak being chained, being woven together to create something positive.
Out of choice. They choose it, right?
By choice, exactly, yeah, they choose it.
All the other chains are pretty much not exactly forced each time, but at least coerced to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So, at least with Thrall and Onrak, it's the only time we see somebody choose to be bound to each other.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the Unbound got themselves chained to the crippled?
I think they were destroyed in a battle with the Dragon in the Lodron Plateau that we see earlier, and they were just left there, and then possibly a herald of the crippled god, or because the Tableau were sacrificing their children to him, the lame children, the maimed children, whatnot. That attracted his attention. I don't know what happened exactly.
So probably they took over being worshipped by the Tableau, and they were doing their thing, and then Crippled God must have found them, right? It's not like the Crippled God found them and sent them to go take over the Tableau.
Yeah, because they mentioned there's a new master. They serve a new master, so...
Okay, yeah.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe it's explored later. Who knows?
So we have a lot of chains, basically.
Obviously, right? It's in the name. It sounds obvious.
I mean, who knew when Paran names it House of Chains that, it's going to keep coming up again and again? We just think it's...
I think the crippled god first names it was Munug in the cave, tent, whatever, where he says, I will fashion my own House of Chains and stuff. And then Paran names it, so... Who knew? The Master of the Deck has prophetic abilities as well, apparently.
No, it's more thematic, right? All this.
I mean, yeah, obviously. And there is one more which we didn't talk about, and the fact that Havorik was chosen unwillingly.
Exactly, yeah. Another set of chains.
Treach essentially
He
just...
basically exchanged, right? One set of chains from Fenner to this one. To
Kind of. I don't think it's a fair comparison to make, because Fenner in Deadhouse Gates is, well, for one, it's pulled down. That's one thing. But Havorik often says that his god is very peculiar in how he treats them.
Yeah.
Because he heals someone in Deadhouse Gates and says, I didn't know Fenner was capable of healing. Yeah, he usually doesn't. So Fenner is much more kind to Havorik than, insofar as a god that is animalistic can be, good, right? Because they don't understand the concept of morality that we do. Treach, who is soul-taken and was not actually always a beast like Fenner is, doesn't care. He did the same with Guntle. It's not the first time, right? So there's a theme popping up again. Another theme that I mentioned earlier, and I think you're more capable of bringing this up, is we mentioned earlier unrequited love between Cutter and Absala and Felicity and Tavo. There's way more, and I think there's a specific couple in this book that you want to really touch upon.
Specific one? Which one?
A certain claw and a certain red blade.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So basically, yeah, but not exactly a theme, but something that, a repeated pattern. This whole book is that the sense of betrayal, the sense of loving someone and not getting that love back, which obviously is a huge thing for Felicity. It has carried on from 3 books for now, because she dies thinking that her sister doesn't love her. And at this point, where we are pretty sure that Tavor doesn't love her as much as Felicity would have liked her to. And again, you mentioned this very nicely, Cutter and Absalar, so I'm not going to touch on that. They love each other, they have grown apart, and, the rest of their feelings have to catch up to what they are now. Then obviously, the biggest betrayal as far as the power levels are concerned is Drijna, right?
Absolutely.
Onrak completely betrayed her. Not only did he bind Kilava with her image on the cave painting, he never really... Yeah, there is a scene, right? We are not given any names, but I think Onrak is visited at night by Kilava and someone else walks in on them. And after that, I think the ritual happens. So is it explicit anywhere? But I'm pretty sure that is Drijna walking in on Onrak and Kilava and immediately losing her mind and becoming a rage-filled goddess, right? So that's one more example of an unrequited love. And yeah, our poor Claw. Pearl.
So, you mentioned Drijna. For one, we have obviously Onrak going with Kilava the night before the ritual and whatnot, and then he would be banished by his clan at the behest of Drijna. And I think there's a scene where Felicity thinks about this, and she says specifically that such a betrayal did not warrant such a reaction.
It's out of proportion.
When someone like Felicity Patton, who has been hurt and betrayed so much that she went through all of these hoops to get revenge on her sister, says that what you're doing is crossing a line, yeah, there were definitely some underlying issues with Drijna as an Imas before she became a goddess. But
or rather, it's, you take hundreds of thousands of years just, sitting with that anger. You never know where it's going to lead you,
not
right?
just that, it's like her reaction when what she did the day after she found out was rally her entire clan and have either Onrak executed or banished, which, yes, he did something sacrilegious to the Imas, but her reaction and how she acted upon it and what she did, even to Felicity...
Can you just remind me? Because the wiki didn't say this.
Oh, yeah, it's they were together, a couple, and then allegedly he slept with Kilava, and then Kilava visited him again.
Yeah. What happened, during the ritual and all?
They were supposed to banish Onrak, I think.
They're supposed to execute him. The first sword is supposed to execute him.
I don't think it was the first... I don't quite remember. The point is, he was going to get banished and / executed. And then, well, first of all, Kilava killed her entire clan. That's one thing. And the other thing, the day after that, the summoning for the ritual happened. And so they all attended the ritual. And that's what happened. Anyway, back to the claw. You were saying...
We are done with Kilava and Onrak and Drijna.
I don't think it quite counts as unrequited love. Betrayal, yes. Unrequited love like the others, not so much.
We don't know. We don't know for sure because at least, I don't know. Onrak feels Drijna's death, right? even after all this millennia and the ritual and everything, he can still feel when she dies. So they're bound. They're mated for some reason, right? So Pearl. I don't know. This, at least in this book, it's one of the smallest storylines, Pearl and Lostara, but it's extremely entertaining to read, right? And no matter what Lostara says, I don't think it's exactly unrequited because I don't know. It's she's pretty much in denial that she loves Pearl.
Yeah.
So I can't really continue much about them.
Pearl is ridiculously head over heels for Lostara, and it shows. I mean, he even admits it, right? He sort of like he has a streak for sentimentality, and it's whatever his curse and something like that. Which is essentially, I love you, please come back for me.
Does he say that?
He does say it. Sentimentality is ever his curse, and that's why he returned, because he looks upon our time together in the Housecape favorably and whatnot. So, I mean, Lostara knows this. She can see it, you know? She's not stupid. It's just that Lostara is very cagey with her love, because she always feared.
Yeah, given her childhood, given her history, and all the things that has happened to that, you know, as a shadow dancer, she was betrayed by her whole temple and everything. Yeah, it's pretty natural that she's not going to throw herself into Pearl's arms. Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
No. Just I wanted to say, if nothing else, it's even more reasonable because she deals with her betrayal and she coped with what happened to her by becoming Redblade, by delivering Malazan justice to those who she looks upon as responsible, because essentially she was captured in the streets of Erlitan, and the entire city just watched an acolyte drag her back to the temple and lock her up in there. And she feels that everyone, and then when she escaped, she lived for like 3 weeks in the streets alone. And she rightfully feels that everyone betrayed her and everyone is guilty, and I must find some way to deal with this. And then in comes Pearl, it's like, hi. It's obvious that romantic feelings might develop because they spend a lot of time together and they have pretty good chemistry. But she is not going to just freely, here you go, have a hug. No. What else can we talk about?
Yeah, there is one other type of unrequited love. Lorik and his father.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The poor son. Oh, it's pretty sad, isn't it? We can't really talk much about Osric, but
Lorik has so many daddy issues. It's amazing.
But he turns out pretty well for all these issues, right?
Because he doesn't want to endeavor like his father. And I think when he spirits away from Araku, from the memory, or he's about to like drown or something, he takes him back to their ancestral home and just says, your bed needs to be cleaned up or something, and then leaves him in his bed and just walks away and flies away. And Lorik just walks in like, well, I wish we could spend more time together, Dad.
I know, the poor boy. But Osric is a horrible person. But
we call him a poor boy. He's tens of thousands of years old.
But he is a small boy to his father. The poor fellow. I just feel bad for him.
Of course you feel bad for him.
Yeah. You know, who else has a lot of daddy issues here in this book? I've told you this before.
Go on.
Karsa?
Oh, yeah. We talked about this.
Yeah, we did.
So, yeah. That's not to say that daddy issues is a theme in this book. It's not particularly. I wouldn't say it is. But it is there. It is present.
I mean, at least 2 main characters have issues. So, makes you think, right?
Mm-hmm. And
this is so hard, to stick to one book. Oh my god, why are we even doing this?
I don't know. I think we can talk about more things in this book. Move on from the subject. So, the subject I want to tackle is, I mentioned earlier Coldane's chains on the wall. There is a lot of flashbacks. There's a lot of legacy, past. For one, all of Karsa's story is essentially a flashback because it takes place before the main timeline that we're following. If Thrall's chaining as well. They're both supposed to be 1159, while we're currently in 1163. The point is, there's a lot of dealing with the past.
Yeah.
There's a lot of revisiting the past. We see that literally happen with Lorik and Osric visiting what Osric calls a memory of the land. Raraku's most ancient memory. And owing perhaps to the fact that Stephen is an archaeologist, and we tend to make a meme of awkward potsherds in the sub. But there's a lot of them in this book, because Raraku is ancient, and the civilizations that have arisen and fallen in Raraku are many.
Just one thing. When Lorik is taken to the memory, is that Raraku?
Mm-hmm.
Is it supposed to be Raraku?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
It's Raraku's most ancient memory.
All right.
And it's a sea.
It's a saltwater sea. It's very clear it's a saltwater sea.
Okay.
It has corals in it. It has salt basins in it.
I do like that you're still salty about this. Okay, so at the time, Raraku was a saltwater sea.
Yes.
So, there's also, from the Touch Gates, a certain Kimlock embraced, touched Fiddler's shoulders,
Yeah.
and thus crafted a song for him, his company.
Yeah.
And that song pops up very literally in Fiddler's and Kalam's heads when they return to Raraku.
Yeah.
The closer they get, the more intense it is. Fiddler gets like headaches from this, like stop singing to Nila Neta when he talks to them. Like, we're not singing, this isn't us.
And Kalam thinks Mogora.
Yeah, Kalam thinks it's Mogora. Like, I really want to touch upon Mogora in past, but we just don't have time.
Oh, we have to. Oh, God. Sorry, you have a different show to go on to?
Okay, fine.
You don't have time.
Talk about it later. Shut up.
Yeah, we were talking about...
We were talking about the song, yes. So, Kalam thought it was Mogora. It was not Mogora. We're not going to touch about Mogora in the past now. We're going to touch about him later. Another case of a very obvious case. Shit. A very obvious case of this theme. Okay. Alright. Okay. I got it. This is the fifth time I'm doing this. Fifth take. It's fine. A very obvious example of the theme of the past and reliving the past being literally the Miles 14 retracing the steps of the Chain of Dogs backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, except they take a detour from Hissa. But all the way until Bathur Crossing, it is littered with fetishes, with spears, all of Arran Way, which they specifically requested to have the trees cut down, and the board said no.
Yeah.
The Kundril, which literally personify this of, we are sorry, because we did not continue to fight with Coltane, and we now wish to have our service to you.
Yeah.
And when they eventually get to Raraku, the ghost of Raraku appear to fight the Dogslayers, right?
I think one of the first ghosts we see is Tano himself, right?
Right, yeah, it's like Spirit Walker. Wait, they call me Spirit Walker now?
Yeah.
So, which is interesting because the spiritual home of the Spirit Walkers is supposed to be Karakarang and not Raraku, but whatever. We have the very literal example, extremely literally personified, first of all, in the Kundril, like I said earlier, and then the ghost of Raraku rising up to fight the Dogslayers.
Yeah.
And some of these ghosts, our protagonists know there is a ghost of some captain in Malaz City with an acid-spattered face that Kalam knows, and says that Kalam knows how to count down, ostensibly as a reference to Hedge or something, or the sappers of the Bridge Burners who don't know how to count down, and that's why his face is like this now.
Yeah.
We have Hedge.
Yeah, Hedge himself, yeah.
There's literally Hedge right there, just jumps on the Fiddler, says, okay, I've got your back, friend. And like, Fiddler breaks down because, well, he lost Hedge. And now he knows it, for real, because he's a ghost. Save my ass. And in a literal example of reliving the past, there's Gamut, who dies and then goes on to join the charge of the ghost of Raraku, fight the Dogslayers, and then leaves. With whom? To go where? We don't know. And lastly, what?
I thought you had a point. I thought he goes off with someone and I don't remember.
We don't actually know. He's just like some woman soldier thing says, okay, you want to join us now? And like, yeah, of course, I want to leave the war behind. And just leaves.
Yeah.
Okay, dipshit. Well, remember that. But, you know, he's dead. And somewhat unrelated part of this is in Memories of Ice, the Witch of Tennis calls Quickpen Child of Raraku.
Yeah.
And then Quickpen appears in Raraku, just go beat the shit out of Camestrello and Golrodom.
Yeah.
Which is just like the best scene. And then you have Kalam just cuffing Fel in the head, that was from my last city. And then just hands him Golrodom, like, here you go back to your Empress. So, what else is there about past? Obviously there's Karsa, right? We already talked about Karsa and how he wishes to relive the past of Palk and go on a glorious raid and kill children. We did a whole episode on that. Go check that out. Self-plug in our own podcast. Nice.
Yeah, I think another thing is, the Tlanimas trying to go to the summoner, right? To break bonds with their past. They've had enough of living in the past. So, Actually, do you know why Logros is staying in 7 cities? Do we get to know that?
So, Onrak says it was to guard the first throne.
Do we have anything more? Because, the book is pretty much about chains and betrayals.
So, first of all, there's a war in Jagodan, right, in which Logros was tasked, on one hand, with protecting the first throne, and on the other hand, with destroying the Jaghood on the Jagodan, which he does, we see that. with Aramala, was it? I think.
Yeah, maybe.
When Karsa goes to the Tellan and then sees all this drag.
Yeah, because they're all Logros, right? The Unbound.
And that's one thing. And the other thing is ostensibly to protect the First Throne, which they later say they moved to a continent south of Seven Cities, which we know to be Kuntali. And a mortal emperor found it, which we know to be Kellanvan.
Yeah.
And then apparently after Kellanvan was done with them, the rest of the Tlanimas dispersed to the Jagodan of the Logros, anyways. So that's that. We don't know more in this book that I know of.
Yeah. Do you want to touch upon compassion?
Yeah. A very obvious example of compassion is Felicin. Both of them. Both Felicins.
Both Felicin. Okay.
Felicin Paran, for one, because, adopting all the foundlings. And we view this primarily from Shaik's perspective, or Heboric's perspective. Heboric views Raraku in a very cynical manner, right? Yeah. Shaik is predominantly occupied with other things like killing the boar. But Raraku houses 50,000 people, provides food, shelter, companionship, family to 50,000 refugees, tribesmen, people that fled Balatan rule. To Heboric, this is a microcosm of Seven Cities, and he views it as an abomination, and he hates it. But Felicin works to improve it. Felicin works to make it a functioning city, a good city, a city where people can live in. Felicin Younger shows compassion to Skilara, and also Greyfrog, because Greyfrog's amazing. But that's for later. He shows compassion to Skilara because Skilara comes to her at the behest of Heboric, also shows her compassion, and says, I am here to find you and protect you. And she's like, I don't need protection. Please come in. You're hurt. You've been assaulted. You went through mud. You did all that. Come here. I'm going to help you. And she's what, 12, 13?
Felicin Younger. We are never told the ages, so let's not even go there.
I think she's like 11 in Dead House Gate. She's really young anyway.
She's young. Adolescent. We don't get an actual number.
So she's really young, and that's what matters. And I can't touch more on Felicin Younger because spoilers, but there is obviously this theme of compassion. Well, no shit. Govian's right there, waiting, holding the door for you. But even in this book, where you wouldn't expect to see it, when you have the murderer and the rapist and the, barbarian in the first, quarter of the book. But even here, if you look at it, and the swords of humor and the banter and the omens and all that, but if you look into it, it's very clearly there. It's very present.
Do you know which is the biggest act of compassion for me in this book?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take a guess?
This is when Lostara bangs Pearl.
Oh my god, no!
Okay.
How is that compassion?
I don't know. I mean, he's been...
No, but it has to do with Pearl and Lostara. Them hiding the truth from Tabor.
Not telling the foe, yeah.
Yeah, so, I felt very bad when I read that. And I think that definitely stands as, the biggest act of compassion they did. And I wasn't expecting Pearl to do it. Though we are shown that Pearl is pretty compassionate when he tries to help the Tlanima's decapitated head and all that. But this one, it was a little unexpected. And, it changed my opinion, obviously. And an unexpected act of compassion is obviously Karsa. The last person you expect to show compassion. But he's been pretty compassionate from the beginning. I don't know, we have touched enough about him, but, the theme of compassion is through and through, it runs through him. What was that line he says to Sibyl at the end? Glory is as nothing, but the same cannot be said of mercy, right?
Of mercy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so turns out Karsa is, one of the most compassionate characters here, as far as this book is concerned. No?
I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
You're being serious?
Yes, I did not think of Karsa as the most compassionate character in the book.
Well, he is compassionate. Everything from Kam to Aramala to Torvald to Bidithal, he doesn't make a song and dance about it. But when compassion is needed, he's there. Yeah.
Okay. A few objections. For one, I don't think what he did to Bidithal can be in any way considered compassionate.
Okay. Let me justify that. One thing, I was just trying to correlate. When we talk about the rapes within the Tabor society,
mm-hmm.
and we think it is a systemic issue, right? It's not that Karsa, Bayroth and Delam are horrible people who go around raping people. It's part of their system. They raid, they kill the men, they rape the women, and they make their bloodline stronger. It's part of who they are. It's abominable, but that's what they do, right? And the whole society there, the whole system has been optimized to this type of a lifestyle. Now,
I will
think
give
about...
you one quick pause before
Yeah.
you go on. I want to remind everyone that we're talking about compassion here. Please carry on.
Right. Oh God, this is not a fun thing, right? These are extremely serious issues.
I agree. That's why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just contrast this with what's happening with Bidithal and his actions. Again, there is a systemic failure there. Would you agree? Anyone could have stopped Bidithal. It did not need Karsa to return from Jagodan with his new sword to come and grab this guy and kill him. Anybody could have stopped him. Everybody from Shaik to Heboric to Lorik to Leoman, Corbolo, anyone with 1 ounce of compassion could have stopped Bidithal, but none of them did because it's part of their system. They have accepted this as something to be sacrificed in return for something else. Much later, we get a quote asking what is an acceptable level of misery. And this is one of the examples. So they have all accepted that this is the price they're going to pay in exchange for something, either a military victory or a consolidation of their power or something. They're getting something in return, and what they're sacrificing are these young girls to this sick man. Mm-hmm. And no matter how he did it, when Karsa steps in and broke this without caring about the consequences, his thought was only to these young girls who were being put through this horrible things for no reason. He just steps in. The thing needed to be done. He steps in. He shows mercy. I would call that an act of mercy. And
I think I agree.
Yeah.
So
I'm just saying that, again, this is a systemic issue. We can't just say the barbarian Teblor are the only ones who have sanctioned rape. Implicitly or explicitly, these people have also sanctioned FGM and rape of these young girls by Bidithal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Of course. So, I have put one small correction. You said it's another systemic failure when you refer to Bidithal. I don't think what the Teblor have is a failure. It is abhorrent to us. It's abominable, but it's not a failure because it was done to preserve society, and the society still exists. What Bidithal is doing.
Who are you to determine that this is the way that society has to be preserved? Who are we to say that these women have to submit and they don't have a choice in that matter?
Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this is absolutely... this has a purpose. Purpose for... Okay, maybe...
It has a purpose. It serves a purpose. But all I'm saying is it is a failure for these women. From the points of view of who? The Dale's namesake, the chief's daughter. Think of her, the system has failed her. She had no choice in the matter. Just like Skilara or Felicity Younger had no choice.
I really don't feel like the two are comparable. Like, when you put it that way, yes. But I feel like what Bidithal is doing is so much worse. Because
there are degrees of violence, obviously. But
okay, I'm not going to get into this argument because I agree with you. Honestly, I honestly agree with you.
Right.
And I need to touch on the other things. So, characters whose main theme, among the main themes, are compassionate for others. One that stood out to us, obviously, is Govian. Another is Heboric, which I'll touch on later. Third one's Ganos, because of compassion in sanctioning the House of Chains. And he speaks about this to Grantel, about there's a million different voices telling me that I should reject the House of Chains, and one of them that's telling me I should sanction it. And when Grantel asks him which one is that, I think it's mine. And when Quickman interrogates him, why did you do that? He's like, I don't know if I can know. Compassion? Probably. Heboric, because have you read his parts about Svelicen? And Fiddler, because, first of all, not only because of what he does in the House Gates, in escorting Cutter, god damn it, in escorting Apsala and Crocus, that's the name, Crocus, to Itkokan.
Yeah.
They have a fight at some point with Kalam. Because Kalam wants to use Hapsala as a tool to kill Lassine because of her skills. And Fiddler doesn't exactly object to the plan, but he's not a huge fan. And he also objects particularly strongly to Kalam's other ideas about what he should do. And it's not necessarily about compassion, because the rebellion is horrid. We see that. And triggering the rebellion is not a particularly great idea to begin with, but I think it's part of it. Another part of it, of course, in this book is Temul. He sets aside his grief about his squad, about his friends, his family. We see later what that does to him with Hedge in the ending, and how broken he feels about it. But at that point in time, he sets aside his grief and listens, and he gives advice.
And gives him an idea. to let the Seti steal the horses.
He says like, so the Wicked won't listen to you, right? What about we borrow their horses for a week or so and have them walk on the train so they realize who's boss? Because you and your 12-year-olds, right, will be riding on horses and they're going to be walking. And eventually, if they want to ride again, they'll have to respect you. Meanwhile, he walked off to cry because he's sad. He's grieving.
Yeah.
And if he was alone, he would probably just break down in tears for the entire night.
Yeah.
That's all for Fiddler because there's more in the future books. But the other one that's very prevalent is Heboric. It's not just that we have all of his sections to listen.
Yeah.
And how he treats both Felicen Paran and Felicen Younger, and Skelara later. But also, Heboric is the first one, and so far the only one, who has gotten in touch with the souls that we see apparently are the Jade statues. Because when he drinks that tea or whatever it is, I don't remember exactly what it is.
Henbara.
When he drinks Henbara tea and he goes into this deep trance, he finds the souls that are within the Jade Giant he touched back in the Taral Island.
Yeah.
And these souls speak of him as the other, the one who has breached the barrier. And very specifically, there's 2 souls in there, and I feel stupid for not bringing this up earlier. One of them being Leandris, which I believe is male, and the other one being Casa, which I believe is female, but it doesn't matter. And Leandris brings something up about God, and their relationship with gods, and all of that. And then Casa rebukes that by saying, "Kneel before order, you blind fool." And then Leandris responds, very elegantly, "Order. I was speaking of compassion."
Yeah, true.
And there's obviously the very abstract nature of the entire thing of Heboric's just on drugs, tripping balls, and suddenly he just sees Jade statues talking about compassion.
Yeah. I don't know. Here, the second thing is these Jade statues are not exactly God,
No.
right? They're just souls trapped in this. And I particularly liked the image of this entire rip, this huge, there's a huge break in the barrier and through which the Jade statues are tumbling out. Thousands are coming out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the scale of it was enormous, and that was very interesting for me. But I'm not sure how this whole thing correlates to any concept of God. So I don't know. It was an acid trip.
To bring it back to Malasan terms, which I understand better than real life religion, apparently,
Yeah.
we see in Memories of Ice that Rathfenna says to Carnadas that he meditated for 3 days and then passed the barrier of some sort of realm.
Oh my God. Oh yes.
And ended up to the reedy things of our God. And then he belittles Carnadas. And then it goes into the round and says, what about it? What about that? Well, yeah, he says that. And he went there, indeed. I never left. So
He says it much more nicely, I'm sure, I, sir, have never left his feet or something.
he doesn't reply to him. He doesn't tell him anything. He just nods along like, yeah, congratulations, very good. And then only in private he tells him that I never left. Itgovian, not the priest.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
So
I love that scene.
It's not the same thing here, but in a way, he is Heboric by meditating, by ingesting the tea, breaking the barrier, and communing with otherworldly entities.
Who are looking for gods? Right?
I don't even know. They're looking for their god, which...
Yeah,
And these entities, whatever they are, speak of compassion. Because even in this entirely wholly different world, right, we have, whence they came from, compassion is something to kneel before. Anyhow, that's all I have for... there's probably many, many more instances of compassion in this book. You mentioned Riga. Riga never actually crossed my mind.
Really?
Yes. Well, that's probably because I never read Cards of the Moon twice. But it didn't cross my mind because I know what she did. She protected Sori from being possessed, and thus she kept some semblance of her personality.
Haven't you seen my one of my theories during the read-along? That the poem Mother's Lament, it's not just about some random woman thinking about her soldiers or, it's about Sori and all that. It's, I just made the correlation that Riga has no children and here is Sori with no mother. And this, Riga adopts her basically.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what I mean. There's so many instances of compassion in these books that don't cross your mind.
Would you call Whiskey Jack being quiet to Paran in the prologue? Would you call that an act of compassion?
Yes, absolutely.
Twice he keeps quiet. He doesn't mention that the world doesn't need another soldier. And he also doesn't correct him when he thinks it's pigs which are being burnt. So that's one of the first times we see compassion. Oh, we could just talk about compassion
and
for
that
hours.
is just in the prologue of the first book.
Just the prologue. Do you know how much I love that book? Oh, you'll never know.
And this is like an entire book of a series of 10 books that, there is so much more to say about this. And we clearly missed it, but here it is. The theme that was introduced chiefly in your face by Edkovian, Memories of Ice, has existed since the prologue of Guardians of the Moon, and it continues in this book as well. Thus, and
it ever was.
And I think, unless you have anything more to add, we could wrap this up here, maybe.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed.
I would love to hear back from you. So if you have anything to say to us, just reach out. We're on Twitter, Reddit. Maura will put the links in the description. Thank you, Maura, for your time.
Thank you, Lee, for your time.
And have a great day or night or evening or whatever. And we'll see you soon.
Bye.